most important lesson I've learned in my entire life is to never, under any circumstances, apply as a night guard for Wincom Industries. It should be at the absolute bottom of your list of job applications. Even jobs like that of a garbage collector would seem more appealing than this hellish nightmare I've endured. It all started when I left college with a shiny new master's degree in engineering clutched in my sweaty palm. I was Jonathan Parker, 24 years old, full of hope and ambition, ready to take on the world. Or so I thought. The job market had other plans for me and my lofty dreams. Weeks turned into months, and the pile of rejection letters grew higher than my dwindling bank account. I'd spend my days crafting cover letters and tweaking my resume, and my nights drowning my sorrows with my 3 best friends, Scott, Matt, and Min. We were all in the same boat, all recent grads struggling to find our footing in the real world. Our nightly gatherings were a mixture of commiseration and celebration. We'd toast to each other's minor victories, a callback here, a second interview there, and console each other through the constant stream of rejections. As our funds dwindled, so did the quality of our gatherings. Gone were the nights of bar hopping and fancy cocktails, replaced by cheap beer in Scott's cramped apartment, the 4 of us huddled around a rickety coffee table. Another day, another rejection, I sighed, tossing my phone onto the table. The screen still displayed the polite but firm email informing me that I wasn't the right fit for yet another entry-level engineering position. Scott, always the optimist, raised his can of beer. Their loss, man. Something will come along soon. It has to, right? Min nodded in agreement, his usually cheerful face marred by the stress of our shared situation. Law of averages, John. Keep applying, and eventually someone's got to say yes. Matt, on the other hand, was lost in his own world, scrolling through his phone with an intensity that suggested he was either looking at job listings or reading about the latest conspiracy theory. With Matt, it was always a toss-up. As the weeks wore on, our gatherings became less frequent. The weight of our unemployment and the constant pressure from family and student loans began to take its toll. We stopped meeting every night, then every other night, until we were down to once a week, if that. It was during one of these increasingly rare get-togethers that desperation finally drove me to expand my job search beyond engineering positions. I was hunched over my laptop, scrolling through listings I would have scoffed at just a few months ago. Security guard, night watchman. Hey, what about this? I said, more to myself than to the others. Night guard at Wincom Industries. The pay is... Wait, that can't be right. Matt perked up at this, his eyes gleaming with that familiar mix of curiosity and suspicion. Wincom Industries? Never heard of them. What's the pay? I double-checked the listing. Sure, I must have misread it. $5,000 per hour? That's insane. It has to be a typo. Scott leaned over my shoulder, his brow furrowed. No way, that's legit, man. Gotta be a scam. But desperation has a way of clouding judgment. Despite the red flags, the unheard-of company name, the too-good-to-be-true salary, I found myself clicking apply. What did I have to lose at this point? The next morning, nursing a hangover and a sense of lingering shame at having applied for such an obvious scam, I was shocked to find an email in my inbox. Subject line: Interview request, night guard position at Wincom Industries. My heart raced as I read the email, part excitement, part dread. The interview was scheduled for the following week. I made a mental note to tell the guys about it later, though a part of me wanted to keep it secret. What if this was my big break? I didn't want to jinx it. The days leading up to the interview were a blur of anxiety and preparation. I researched everything I could about Wincom Industries, which wasn't much. The company seemed to have no web presence beyond the job listing site where I'd found the position. No website, no social media accounts, nothing. It was as if Wincom Industries didn't exist in the digital world. The morning of the interview, I woke to the sound of my alarm blaring beside my ear. I'd set it to its loudest possible volume, terrified of oversleeping and missing this opportunity. I scrambled out of bed, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie for the 100th time, I caught sight of the dark circles under my eyes. When had those appeared? The stress of unemployment had taken its toll, leaving me looking older and more haggard than my 24 years. "You can do this, John," I muttered to myself, trying to summon some confidence. "It's just a night guard position. How hard can it be?" I left my apartment with plenty of time to spare, not wanting to risk being late. The address took me to an industrial part of town I'd never had reason to visit before. As I drove, the buildings grew more dilapidated, the streets emptier. An uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Finally, I spotted it, a rundown building with a faded sign that might once have displayed the Wincom Industries logo. It looked more like an abandoned warehouse than an active business. For a moment, I considered turning around and forgetting about the whole thing. But the memory of my dwindling bank account and mounting bills steeled my resolve. I parked my car and approached the building, my shoes crunching on gravel and broken glass. A lone security guard stood at the entrance, his blue uniform a stark contrast to the gray, decaying surroundings. As I got closer, I noticed his vacant expression and the way he gripped his baton, knuckles white. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the eerie quiet. "I'm here for an interview. For the night guard position?" The guard didn't speak. He simply turned and led me to a soot-black office, pointing at the door. I thanked him, but he was already walking away, his movements stiff and mechanical. Taking a deep breath, I raised my hand to knock on the door. Before I could, it swung open, revealing a man who looked to be in his 60s. He was bald, Asian, his face a roadmap of wrinkles. His black tuxedo was riddled with holes and stains, a far cry from the crisp suits I'd seen in my other interviews. "Welcome," he said, his voice surprisingly cheerful. "You must be Jonathan here for the interview." "Yes, that's me," I managed to stutter out, thrown off balance by his appearance and demeanor. He ushered me into the office, gesturing for me to sit in a chair that looked like it had seen better days. It squeaked ominously as I lowered myself onto it. The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Alpha, the owner of Wincom Industries, settled behind the desk. "May I see your resume, Jonathan?" he asked, extending a gnarled hand. I handed it over, watching in confused silence as he appeared to read it upside down. After a few minutes of this bizarre charade, he handed it back to me with a wide smile. "Very well. You fit all the requirements," he announced. "Your shift starts at 9 p.m. sharp and ends at 5 a.m. Your salary will be $5,000 per hour, as advertised." My mind reeled. This couldn't be real. "Sir," I began, I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I have to ask, why such a high salary for a night guard position?" Mr. Alpha's smile never wavered. "We value our employees highly at Wincom Industries, Jonathan. Now, when you come for your first shift tonight, please come to this office first. There will be a letter waiting for you with all the details you need." And just like that, the interview was over. I found myself back outside, blinking in the harsh sunlight, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, alternating between excitement at my newfound employment and nagging doubt about the legitimacy of the whole situation. By the time my friends arrived for our nightly gathering, I was a bundle of nerves. "You're kidding," Scott said flatly when I told them about the interview and the job offer. "No one in their right mind would offer that much to a night guard." I shrugged, unable to argue with his logic. "I'm confused too," I admitted. "But the money... Guys, we're talking $40,000 for one night's work. Even if it only lasts a week before they realize their mistake, that's life-changing money." Min, always the voice of reason, leaned forward. "It does sound too good to be true, John. But if it is legit, maybe they have some valuable trade secrets they're protecting. That could explain the location and the pay." Matt had been unusually quiet throughout the conversation, his face growing paler by the minute. Finally, he spoke up, his voice low and serious. "John, I've got a bad feeling about this. Something's not right." I rolled my eyes, prepared for another of Matt's paranormal theories. "How many times, Matt?" "There's no such thing as ghosts." "You never know," he replied darkly. As the night wore on and my friends prepared to leave, Matt hung back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a locket on a chain. "Take this," he said, pressing it into my hand. I examined the locket, confused. "What is it? A charm to protect me from ghosts?" I joked weakly. Matt's expression remained serious. "It's not a charm. It's a warning system, I guess you could say. The locket will burn when you're in danger. If that happens, hide. No matter what. And there are earphones inside. They'll connect to your phone via Bluetooth." I stared at him, caught between gratitude for his concern and exasperation at his paranoia. "Matt, I appreciate the thought, but just take it," he insisted. "Please, for my peace of mind, if nothing else." Unable to argue with the genuine worry in his eyes, I nodded and pocketed the locket. Matt left without another word, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the weight of the locket in my pocket. As 9 p.m. approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. I kept telling myself it was just nerves about the new job, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Something about the whole situation felt off. I arrived at Wincom Industries at 8:59 p.m., parking the Ford Anglia they'd inexplicably provided for my use in the empty lot. The building looked even more ominous at night, a looming shadow against the starless sky. With a deep breath, I made my way to the black office where I'd had my interview. As promised, an envelope with my name on it sat on the desk. I tore it open, my hands shaking slightly as I read the contents. Wincom Industries. To Jonathan, the night guard. Welcome to Wincom Industries. We expect you are ready for your role as a night guard. Please proceed to Block C-3 and inform the current guard that his shift is over. Thanks. Murdoch Alpha, owner of Wincom Industries. Attached was a crudely drawn map of the building, with Block C-3 circled in red. I pocketed the map and made my way through the dim, algae-covered hallways, fighting the urge to turn and run with every step. I found the night guard's office easily enough. Inside was a man dressed like a Navy SEAL, his expression unreadable as he turned to face me. "You're here for the night shift?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I'm supposed to tell you that your shift is over." The guard's lips twitched in what might have been a smirk. "You must be really brave to come up here for the night shift. Most people who came here didn't last a day at this job. The previous one didn't even last a night, died under mysterious circumstances, and it was his first night too." A chill ran down my spine at his words. Before I could respond, he handed me another envelope and left without another word. With trembling fingers, I opened this new envelope and began to read. Wincom Industries. To the night guard. Your job is mostly carefree, and you can do anything you want during your stay, but be sure to patrol around the building at least twice. That's about it, but there are a few rules you must comply with and never, under any circumstances, break. During stay. Rule 1. If the lights start flickering, it is important that you stay in your seat, no exceptions, and ignore anything such as voices or shadows. During this time, it is elementary you ignore it and stay on your seat. Rule 2. At exactly 10:29 p.m., all clocks and watches stop working or malfunction. This will last for about 15 minutes. Before this time, you must find a place where you can hide yourself and not be found. Inside the largest drawer is one such place. Remember that this continues for a period of 15 minutes. Do not come out even if the clock suddenly starts to show 10:24 p.m. Stay wherever you are hiding. Count in your head for convenience. Rule 3. If you see a man come towards you at any time, do not look at him directly. He will ask you a few questions. Give no answer, but give him a task, any task. If he accepts and does it, you're all okay. But if he doesn't, then you'll find the item in the first drawer handy. However, if he ever does return even after completing the given task, good luck making your escape to the inn close to the building. Rule 4. If you hear the sounds of a train, do not investigate. This place is not a metro station, so just ignore the sounds of the train no matter what. It will go away. Rule 5. Look at the CCTV often. If at any time you see a pool of blood in CCTV number 3, secure the door and don't let them in under any circumstances. Rule 6. If by any chance you see yourself staring at you through camera 3 and loud bangs start coming from the door of the office, use what is left for you in the topmost drawer. During patrol, Rule 1. Take minimum 2 patrols between 12:15 and 12:45, 2:10, and 2:40. Rule 2. Do not use the lift on your first patrol. Rule 3. Do not use a flashlight between 2:21 and 2:24. Rule 4. If you hear growling voices behind you, run as fast as you can towards the office and stay there. Don't worry, your patrol still counts. Rule 5. If you use the lift or stairs, do not go to the 6th floor. We only have 5 floors, that is, G, A, B, C, and D. Rule 6. Do not talk to anyone during your patrol. Better still, keep as quiet as you can, even if they threaten you to speak up. Rule 7. If you notice an eyeball on the floor anywhere, leave that place immediately. Good luck. Murdoch Alpha, owner of Wincom Industries. I read the list once, twice, 3 times, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. This had to be some kind of joke, right? A prank to haze the new guy? But as I sat there in that dilapidated office, the weight of Matt's locket heavy against my chest, a creeping sense of dread began to overtake me. What if it wasn't a joke? What if these rules were real and breaking them had consequences? I shook my head, trying to clear away the paranoid thoughts. No, this was ridiculous. I was a rational, educated person. There had to be a logical explanation for all of this. Determined to prove to myself that this was all nonsense, I leaned back in the creaky chair and pulled out my phone, connecting it to the earphones hidden in Matt's locket. If I was going to be here all night, I might as well have some music to keep me company. As the first notes of a familiar song filled my ears, I allowed myself to relax slightly. This was just a job, albeit a strange one. I'd follow their silly rules, collect my outrageous paycheck, and be done with it. Simple as that. That's when the lights started flickering. My heart leaped into my throat as the fluorescent lights above me began to stutter, casting erratic shadows across the room. Rule I flashed through my mind: if the lights start flickering, it is important that you stay in your seat, no exceptions, and ignore anything such as voices or shadows. Gripping the arms of my chair, I forced myself to remain seated, my eyes fixed on the scratched surface of the desk in front of me. The flickering intensified, and with it came a low, whispering sound that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Ignore it, I told myself firmly. It's nothing, just your imagination playing tricks on you. But as the seconds ticked by, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I couldn't make out words exactly, but the tone was urgent, pleading. It took every ounce of willpower I had not to turn my head, not to acknowledge the shadows I could see dancing at the edges of my vision. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, the lights stabilized and the whispers faded away. I let out a shaky breath, realizing I'd been holding it. My shirt was damp with sweat, and my hands trembled as I loosened my grip on the chair. It's nothing, I muttered to myself, trying to slow my racing heart. Just some faulty wiring. That's all. But even as I said the words, I knew I didn't believe them. The atmosphere in the room had changed and became heavier somehow. It felt as if I was being watched, though I couldn't see anyone. Desperate for a distraction, I turned my attention to the CCTV monitors lining one wall of the office. Each screen showed a different part of the building: empty hallways, abandoned offices, a reception area that looked like it hadn't seen a visitor in years. Everything seemed normal, mundane even, which only served to heighten my unease. How could everything look so ordinary after what I'd just experienced? My eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. 10:22 p.m. A jolt of panic shot through me as I remembered Rule 2. At exactly 10:29 p.m., all clocks and watches stop working or malfunction. This will last for about 15 minutes. Before this time, you must find a place where you can hide yourself and not be found. 7 minutes. I had 7 minutes to find a hiding place. The rule mentioned the largest drawer, but as I looked around the office, I saw several large filing cabinets. Which one was I supposed to use? Panic rising in my throat, I began yanking open drawers at random. Most were filled with old papers, dust billowing up as I disturbed their contents. Others were empty, echoing hollowly as I slammed them shut. 10:27 p.m. 2 minutes left. Finally, I found it. A bottom drawer large enough for a person to fit inside. Without hesitation, I climbed in, pulling the drawer shut behind me. The space was cramped and dark, the musty smell of old paper filling my nostrils. As I lay there in the darkness, trying to control my breathing, I felt a warmth against my chest. Matt's locket was heating up, just as he said it would when danger was near. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through me. This was real. All of it was real. I don't know how long I stayed in that drawer. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the suffocating darkness. I tried counting in my head as the rules suggested, but fear kept derailing my thoughts. Was that a scratch I heard outside the drawer? A whisper? The sound of footsteps? When I finally gathered the courage to peek out, the office was exactly as I'd left it. The clock on the wall read 10:45 p.m. 16 minutes had passed. Shaking, I extracted myself from the drawer and collapsed back into the chair. What had I gotten myself into? This wasn't just some boring security job. This was something else. Something dangerous. For a moment, I considered leaving. I could walk out right now, get in that Ford Anglia, and never look back. But then I thought of my empty bank account, of the mountain of student debt looming over me. Could I really walk away from this opportunity? As I sat there, wrestling with my fear and my desperate need for this job, a movement on one of the CCTV screens caught my eye. A man was walking down one of the hallways, heading straight for the office. Rule 3 echoed in my mind. If you see a man come towards you at any time, do not look at him directly. He will ask you a few questions. Give no answer, but give him a task, any task. Panic gripped me anew. I wasn't ready for this. I didn't know what to do, what task to give him. But before I could think of anything, the door to the office swung open. Fighting every instinct, I kept my eyes lowered as the man entered. From my peripheral vision, I could see he was wearing a hat, but the rest of him was a blur. Sunny weather today, isn't it? The voice that spoke was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It was as if multiple people were speaking in unison, their voices overlapping in an unsettling chorus. My mind raced. I couldn't answer him. I had to give him a task. Any task. "Bring me a glass of water," I blurted out, my voice shaking. There was a moment of silence, and I feared I'd done something wrong. But then, without a word, the man turned and left the office. I sagged in relief, but it was short-lived. What would happen when he came back? The rules hadn't mentioned anything about what to do after the task was completed. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. My eyes darted between the CCTV screens and the door, dreading the man's return. When he finally did come back, I was shocked to see he wasn't carrying a glass of water, but a glass of chocolate milk. He set it on the desk in front of me and left without a word. I stared at the glass, my mind whirling. This wasn't what I'd asked for. Was that good? Bad? The rules hadn't covered the situation. Unsure of what else to do, I picked up the glass and took a sip. The chocolate milk was rich and sweet, a jarringly normal taste in this surreal nightmare. As I set the glass down, my eyes fell on CCTV screen number 3. My blood ran cold. There, in the middle of what looked like an old conference room, was a large pool of dark liquid. Even through the grainy black and white footage, I knew it could only be one thing: blood. Rule 5 flashed through my mind. If at any time you see a pool of blood in CCTV number 3, secure the door and don't let them in under any circumstances. With a surge of adrenaline, I leaped from my chair and ran to the door. It was a heavy metal thing with multiple locks. I engaged everyone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage it. No sooner had I secured the last lock than I heard it, a low, guttural growling coming from just outside the door. It wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was something else entirely. I stumbled backward, my eyes fixed on the door. The growling grew louder, more distorted. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse than the growling. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. When I finally gathered the courage to look back at the CCTV screens, the pool of blood was gone. My legs gave out and I collapsed into the chair. What was happening? How could any of this be real? I wanted to call my friends, to hear a familiar voice, but I was too afraid to take out my phone. What if that broke some rule I hadn't been told about? As I sat there, trying to make sense of everything that had happened, a horrible realization dawned on me. It wasn't even midnight yet. I still had hours to go before my shift ended, and I still had to do my patrols. The thought of leaving the relative safety of the office filled me with dread, but I knew I had to do it. The rules were clear about the patrols, and after everything I'd seen, I wasn't about to start breaking rules now. With trembling hands, I checked my watch. 11:45 p.m. I had 30 minutes before I needed to start my first patrol. 30 minutes to gather my courage and prepare myself for whatever horrors awaited me in the dark, empty halls of Wincom Industries. As I sat there, counting down the minutes, I couldn't help but think of my friends, of Scott's optimism, Min's rationality, and Matt's paranoid warnings. I wished I had listened to Matt more closely now. Maybe he had known something, sensed something about this place. I touched the locket around my neck, drawing comfort from its solid presence. Whatever happened next, at least I had this small piece of protection, this connection to the world outside this nightmarish building. At 12:14 a.m., I stood up on shaky legs. It was time for my first patrol. With one last glance at the CCTV screens and a deep, steadying breath, I unlocked the office door and stepped out into the unknown. The hallway stretched before me, a dark tunnel punctuated by flickering fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay, and each step I took echoed ominously in the silence. I tried to move quietly, remembering Rule 6. Do not talk to anyone during your patrol. Better still, keep as quiet as you can, even if they threaten you to speak up. But the old floorboards creaked under my weight, each sound making me wince. As I turned a corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the middle of the hallway, was a single bloodshot eyeball staring up at me from the floor. Rule 7 flashed through my mind. If you notice an eyeball on the floor anywhere, leave that place immediately. Without hesitation, I turned and ran back the way I had come, my heart pounding in my chest. I was so focused on getting away from the eyeball that I almost missed the sound. A low, rumbling noise that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It took me a moment to recognize it for what it was: the sound of a train. Rule 4. If you hear the sounds of a train, do not investigate. This place is not a metro station, so just ignore the sounds of the train no matter what. It will go away. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block out the noise, but it only seemed to get louder, the rumbling turning into a deafening roar. The floor beneath my feet began to vibrate, and I could have sworn I felt a rush of air, as if a train was passing right by me. But that was impossible. I was on the 3rd floor of an office building. There couldn't be a train here. Could there? Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the noise stopped. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the sound had been. I stood there, gasping for breath, my whole body trembling. That's when I heard the growling. It started low, almost imperceptible, but it quickly grew louder, a chorus of inhuman voices snarling and snapping behind me. I didn't dare look back. Instead, I ran. Rule 4 echoed in my head. If you hear growling voices behind you, run as fast as you can towards the office and stay there. Don't worry, your patrol still counts. I've never run so fast in my life. The growls seemed to be right at my heels, hot breath on the back of my neck. I could see the office door ahead, a beacon of safety in this nightmare. I slammed into the door, fumbling with the handle. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought it was locked. But then it gave way, and I tumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind me and engaging every lock. The growling continued outside the door for several agonizing minutes before finally fading away. I slumped to the floor, my legs no longer able to support me. Tears streamed down my face as the full weight of what was happening hit me. This wasn't a job. It was a death trap, and I was caught right in the middle of it. As I sat there trying to catch my breath and calm my racing heart, a movement on one of the CCTV screens caught my eye. I looked up, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There, on camera 3, was me. But not the me sitting in the office, terrified and exhausted. This was another me, standing in the middle of the frame, staring directly into the camera with a wide, unnatural grin. Before I could process what I was seeing, a loud banging started at the office door. It was so forceful that the entire door shook in its frame. Rule 6 flashed through my mind. If by any chance you see yourself staring at you through camera 3 and loud bangs start coming from the door of the office, use what is left for you in the topmost drawer. With shaking hands, I stumbled to the desk and yanked open the top drawer. Inside was a revolver, loaded and ready. As I picked up the gun, weighing its unfamiliar heft in my hand, I realized that this night was far from over, and surviving until morning was going to take everything I had. The banging on the door grew louder, more insistent. The other me on the CCTV screen hadn't moved, that unnerving grin still plastered across its face. And underneath it all, I could hear the faint sound of a train in the distance, growing closer once again. I gripped the revolver tightly, my palms slick with sweat. Whatever was coming, I had to be ready. I had to survive. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. At Wincom Industries, the night shift was only the beginning of the horror.